Hi, and welcome to PodRocket, a web development podcast brought to you by LogRocket. LogRocket provides AI-first session replay and analytics, which surface the UX and technical issues impacting user experiences. Start understanding where your users are struggling by trying it for free at logrocket.com. Hey, everybody. I am your host today, Paige Niedringhaus, and we have Dominic Gannaway, the author of Ripple.js, here to talk about his new framework, Ripple. So welcome to the show, Dominic.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
We are very excited to have you. Before we were actually started recording, I was telling you that I've been seeing a lot of news articles and kind of blogs talking about Ripple. So for people who haven't had a chance to actually dive in and try the framework or get familiar with it, can you just tell us a little bit about what Ripple is and why developers might want to choose it?
Yeah, so Ripple is a sort of, as I put it, a love letter towards the front-end world of the web and UI. So I've been working in this space now in open source for about 10 to 12 years. And that journey's brought me through a lot of different ideas and a lot of different sort of patterns and principles. And I think a lot of it's kind of articulated and collected in my mind along the way. And it's always been that sort of nagging me that there's not something out there that is quite the sort of intersection of all those points together. I decided I'd try and build it. I tweeted about it and Blue Sky messaged people about it and was like, hey, here's an idea, which was originally called Inferno X as a sort of placeholder name. And I was like, what do you think? And people were like, oh, that's pretty cool. You should definitely build it. And so I just did that. I built it. It's been a month or just over a month since I open sourced it. And the reception has been really, really good. And for those who don't know what Ripple is, it's a UI framework that's based on TypeScript. But more importantly, it's kind of its own language. So it's a superset of TypeScript. So it enables us to do certain things that you can't quite do today. And that's because it has parts of its own language. You have this notion of a component keyword. You have something that looks like JSX, but it's not JSX. And you can only use that sort of templating language that looks like JSX in a component. But the benefits there are you can then use more expressive behavior in your template. You can use an if statement. You can put like variables inside your template. You can put call expressions in there and call out to different functions. You can create states and you can do all sorts of wonderful small things, which aren't anything overall very new because these are concepts that have been around for a long time. States and effects and templating is nothing new. But the idea is to accumulate them into a package that kind of feels fresh and inviting and tackles some of the things that people have been complaining about for a long time with JSX and with existing other frameworks. So Ripple has its own file extension because it's its own thing. And that means we've had to re-implement everything from scratch. It has its own language server so we can actually hook into TypeScript. It has its own TextMate grammar so we can do syntax highlighting and show you how it looks. We have a Prettier plugin so you can do code formatting. We have, you name it. We've had to do all of it. But it's been fun. It's been exciting. Parts have been vibe coded, which is something that, you wouldn't be able to build a framework in a week without having AI tooling. And on that note of AI tooling, it's kind of interesting because some of the things I found whilst building Ripple and having it analyze our sort of README and our context is that it's able to generate a lot better code overall than you'd get from other frameworks. Obviously, no AI LLM right now knows about Ripple, but if you give it enough context, it performs really well. It gives that really good input. And we've tried to keep the API surface simple, or as we call it, elegant. We try to make the framework be inviting and keeping things, the concepts, to a minimal amount so that you're not having to have 20 different hooks to get to where you want to go. And we're not having to create a lot of verbosity around how you access things and get reactivity or how you can pass reactivity around. It's kind of it's kept to a minimal. I don't know if that's where we'll stay in the future. I don't know how things will progress. We're a team of 7 or 8 people now, which is bizarre. People have come on board and been really effective in helping code and update the docs and we have a little small team now and bugs have got mainly squashed. So I do feel that will be viable to be used in production in the coming months. And we're underway building server-side rendering. And next after that will be hydration. And we'll do the things that you expect Ripple to do. So yeah, in a nutshell, Ripple is a new way of doing things. Oh, and it's really fast. Probably the fastest framework there is. But we're not trying to be the fastest. I mean, we're just trying to do things right. I've just got a knack for wanting speed. So it's probably that the consequence of the factor. But it's more about having a really good sort of place to code and feel like the code's exciting and fun to write and scale as well. Like it's all about scalability. Having worked in Svelte and worked in Lexical and React, it's like there's an intersection point where your really pretty code base becomes less pretty than you liked it to be, and there's technical debt everywhere, and like things are very convoluted now, and that will always be the case regardless of your framework or language of choice. But like we're trying to hopefully provide better patterns so that intersection point moves to further on, and also we're trying to make it so that you can easily test and discover and debug and the things that you want when things don't go right, so that you can actually get through things without having to find some resource. I say that on Stack Overflow, no one does it anymore, do they? They just use ChatGPT. But finding how to get through something or how a certain thing works, and trying to avoid
Elizabeth here, producer for PodRocket. We're running a listener survey to help shape future episodes and make the podcast a better experience. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes of your time, and you can find the link in the description.
So it sounds like right now Ripple would take the place of React or Astro or Svelte. Do you have aspirations to make it more of a meta framework, kind of like SvelteKit or Next.js in the future, or do you want to keep it kind of at the view layer and keep it in that space for now?
I think, yes, we would eventually do want a meta framework. I think Ripple can be both. I think it's an interesting point of like, where do you go with those concepts? And because you eventually get more opinionated, do you have routing that's on the file system, or is it like in the code, or is it? And we need to discover that and figure that out. We're not aiming to replace React or Next or SvelteKit or anything like that. We're just aiming to build the best thing that we can build. And maybe they can leverage and learn from us, and we can learn from them. And it's more about concept of like sharing and innovating in open source space. A lot of the ideas from Ripple have come almost directly from Svelte 5, because that's what I worked on recently. And a lot of the ideas that will be coming to Ripple are ideas I also had when I was on a React team. So they will be coming in because like they never made it to light of day in React. They were kind of like things used internally. I feel like are really good things, and I think would benefit Ripple as well. So I think, although right now we'll set our targets ambitiously to be just something that you can use in production, like long term, I see a more ambitious path of maybe integrating AI into the sort of dev server. So you can, when you load up like your local dev environment, the AI is baked into that environment, and you can there's an issue on the page or something like that, and it can work with you to figure out why it's happening and can recommend stuff and hook into your IDE as part of the meta framework. Things that are really like difficult sometimes are to do with server like rendering. Like, in React you have server components, and you have this notion of running code on the node server, and then it gets passed through to the client, and you have this idea of like RPC, remote functions. These are all great when they work well, but when things break or things don't work as accordingly, it's very difficult for developers to know, I need to add Zod schemas over here to validate this is working, and it's not working because of this, and how do I debug it, and how does this connect to here and here to here? It's really complicated. It's really complicated for like the people building it, let alone the people using it. So like, I feel like there's definitely a world we can go to where we can kind of make that better for people. And ultimately, they build better UX for their users and customers and the people that use the application they're building.
Yeah. I mean, you really have like a prime opportunity to make it AI focused first or AI friendly first, which is, I think, probably a really big advantage in today's framework world, because everybody else built their framework before AI agents were a thing. So they didn't have to think about or contend with how to make it good for both developers and for their agents who are doing the coding for them.
And it's important as well that we're not trying to clash with like Cursor or Copilot or any of these tools like Claude. Is like you should coexist and work with them. As soon as you start trying to compete with these tools, you're never going to win, because we're already trying to compete with React and Svelte at the moment. Those are our target competitors, I guess, even though we don't really look at it that way. But as soon as you start going into the AI space, you broaden your sort of surface area of what you're trying to do, and ultimately you then make it more challenging, more risky, and that can turn out bad, it could backfire. And so we're just thinking about things bit by bit, trying to make logical conclusions as to what we want to do. So like, it's fun right now. Who knows if it will continue to be fun, but and there's obviously lots of negativity as well, because it's when something new comes around and it does stuff differently, and we change the status quo in how we do templating. That's been the controversial one. You got people that love it and people that hate it. And so And that's good because that's what happened when React came out. And people are like, oh, you've now like separation of concerns. Like, why have you got like your templating with like your view logic, And now nobody looks at it that way. That's the truth. So like maybe we'll onto something, maybe we're not, maybe it won't take off. Who knows? But it's fun. That's the main thing.
Yeah, and I wanted to back up for a sec because it seemed like you glossed over this. Did you say that you wrote Ripple in about a week's time?
I kind of hacked it together early in the year. Like I did a sort of prototype of like how it could be. And that's when I was at Vercel. I since then obviously left. So then I had to start again. But I had all the ideas on how that worked. And I just kind of put it together in a week. Yeah. So it was all fresh code. But like, yeah, just did it again. I mean, I had a good idea of what to do. I've done this 5 times now. I think like six framework I've written. So a lot of the bootstrapping was already there. A lot of the hard bits were obviously the parser is completely new. So we had to figure out how to do that. I figured out how to do that. And that was tedious at best, taking something that wasn't designed to do that and making it do something else. And obviously there's other things too. Like we had to figure out how the Reactivity API was going to look, which we changed. We launched with like the $ prefix Reactivity, and everyone hated it. They said it looked like PHP and it was confusing and there was too much dollars everywhere. And so we changed it, and that was good feedback. It was confusing, but yeah, so we removed that. We changed it. We had like a good sort of community post, talking about the change, why we did it and how we did it. And so, yeah, it was like designed by committee. Ultimately, I made the decision in the end, but it was based on feedback from others. And yeah, we felt this was better. We tried it out, we liked it, so we shipped it. So I think a week after launching, we changed the Reactivity syntax. And then again, because we're so early on in this stage, we've already like changed how several different APIs have looked. It's been very much like alpha, pre-alpha, where you can do that. And that's the luxury we have at this phase. You can't do that in React if you launch with it. And
you're not supporting production applications yet.
Unless you call it unstable, and then you get away with it. It's like a gray area that seems to be fine,
Let's talk a little bit more about the reactivity, because I know that that's always a question people have. There's signals, and then there's virtual DOM if you're using React or Next.js. So how does reactivity work in Ripple, and what's your take on it to kind of make it fine-grained enough for the people who really want to get in there and tweak things, and also just more generic for the developers who just want things to update when they call a function or click a button?
That's a good point. So the reactivity in Ripple, I believe, is unique. I don't think there's anyone else doing anything like it. Also, it's not completely unique in terms of its process and how it works is very much like signals. In other words, you have this notion of lazy sort of evaluation. When you have something like a bit of a trapped value and you read the trapped value, there's 2 parts to that. The trapped value obviously lives in your code. It looks like it lives inside the component or wherever it's being created. You can create trapped values outside of components too. They just have to be tied to a component in a weird way. So like you can have it. It's a bit like useState. You have to call useState from a component or from a hook that is called from a component. And it's the same thing for Ripple's trapped values and trapped anything. Or the reactivity system works that way. And that's because there is only one relationship, and that is the thing that reads it kind of has a dependency on it. So if you use it inside an effect, that effect under the hood is a block, we call it. And if you use it inside a template, that under the hood, that template's a block. And that template then has a dependency on that particular trap value. And it stores its version at the point of time of reading it. So it'll be like your version 2. And then if you make a change to the state or to the trap value, then the version increments, so it becomes 3. And what happens is we schedule an update from the very root, because everything has to be topological. And as we traverse through the tree of blocks in this case, components aren't really a thing. Everything's a block, a bit like everything in React's a fiber. And as we traverse through the block sort of tree, we encounter this block effect or template block, and we check its dependencies and we say, hey, we will rerun you if your dependency versions don't match. And in this case, because it's changed, they haven't, so run it again. And we create these blocks very fine grain. These are like as they would be in sort of like Solid or Svelte 5 or Vue Vapor. They're very small, granular things. So these are the blocks that just update the very DOM node that needs to be updated. So in terms of like granularity, it's no different from those. But the benefit is because we only have a relationship one way. There is no relationship from the trap value to the block again, which is how signals work. That means we don't have to do as much sort of hard wiring and plumbing to set everything up and to disconnect everything. And that means that we use significantly less memory. And we also have a far simpler process in terms of like how things get connected and disconnected. So it means we can shortcut in a bunch of places and say, hey, if we know that nothing is going to have like a cleanup function, or a cleanup function is going to fire in this entire subtree, we can just disconnect it and it will get garbage collected. We don't need to traverse through it and disconnect everything as we go. And that means that we use a lot less memory from doing that. And that's one of the things I noticed when building Svelte 5 was like, because ironically I built the signals runtime for Svelte 5. And towards the end of it, I was like, we have this concept called unowned signals. What if we just went with that the whole way through and tweaked it so that it's now something that has to be tied to a component? And it turns out that works really well. So it is top-down rendering in a way, but like, there's no components that re-render. There's no thing. There's no virtual DOM. There's another. It's just it's a new concept, but it turns out to work really well. I mean, we'll see how much more it scales. The downside, obviously, is you just can't create like global state, and I kind of think that's a good thing. Don't know why people are so obsessed with this notion of creating global state, because it causes all sorts of issues. On a server, you then have to be careful because you might share state between different clients connecting. On the client itself, you have this issue where like you can read it in different places at different times, and it can technically be different if you mutate it, and it gets weird. So we recommend using context, like you would do in React or in Solid or Svelte. In fact, any framework, because that is the correct way of doing so. And you put it in there, and then it will propagate correctly through the tree and remain consistent. So yeah, we've trying to promote good practices, and that's actually a good one. Although it's annoyed a few people that they can't do what they want to do, it turns out it's fine,
Yeah, they just have to find other ways to achieve the same thing. But I do appreciate, I think, the fact that you're not actively promoting global state, because I have gotten into some Svelte issues in the past where I thought that values that I had stored on the front end were also available on the back end and were causing some weird bugs because they were not. So I've learned valuable lessons from things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of this is like I've had a good idea and it's turned out not to be a good idea. And then you're like, oh no, it's too late now. And next time we won't do that, And so I've essentially got a checklist of all these things that have gone wrong or gone right. And like, I'm going through them. Okay, when we build it, we make sure we do that, I think also one thing we want to do is differentiate our naming of things to not confuse people. We've already kind of confused people already, and we're trying to fix it. For one example was our context was called create context. And people used it like you would do in React, and it isn't like React. You don't put a provider around your subtree, and there's none of that. You kind of use it like Svelte in terms of you read and you set it in a component and you get it within a component. So people were using it like React and complaining and saying, look, hey, it's not working how I expect Y. And so we renamed it to just do new context. And it's different enough that people are like, oh, it's different. Maybe it works differently. And that's important, right? And that was an important thing for our reactivity too. We didn't call it signal. People kept asking us to call it signal. I said, but it's not a signal. They're like, but it looks like a signal. I'm like, but it isn't a signal, okay? So we called it track. And we did that because you're tracking the value. And like, you can pass also a closure to that or a function, and it becomes like a computed track. And so like, we've used one API to represent two things. And you can pass a getter setter as like arguments 2 and 3. So that means you can debug whenever anyone reads it or anyone sets it. And you can also do other things too. You can change the value that comes back, and you can do introspection. That's really great for debuggability. Like the other day, I was trying to figure out why something was not working. So I put a function in for the set, and I was like, it's getting set here. In Svelte, there is like a inspect room that works similar to that, but like we felt like we can just remove like 4 APIs and just have it as like a part of track. And it turns out people like that, And yeah, there's a few other things too, like we've done, but like overall, we've tried to just keep things as minimal as we can, avoided like adding things because other frameworks have it. Like, oh, are you going to create like suspense boundaries? We're like, no, we can actually just use try and catch. And so we take the try statement, and that can do catch. Now it's an error boundary. And you do pending, which is obviously a new keyword we've added. And it's now, that's where you do your pending. So you can show like loading in there. And there you go. We've not added like a new API, we just extended the language a bit. And so there's a few things there too. So, and if you want to use like asynchronicity, you just await it, which is a bit like Svelte's async too, but you just await it inside your component. And if you want to await something that changes, you await the track value, and tracks are like vendables. So you can do that, and then it will update when it changes. So yeah, we've taken a lot of ideas from others and kind of layered on top of them. I like to think of it a bit like Apple. Apple like to come into the game late when everyone's done something, and they just refine it a bit better and call it a different name. They haven't done that with Apple Intelligence. That's kind of gone wrong. But generally speaking, they do that with plenty of things like FaceTime, etc. And so we like to think that we've kind of done something similar here, where we've looked at what's happened before, taken the good ideas and kind of like left out some of the other things too. And in terms of what we want to really achieve as well, it's like, how do we do some of the things that we think we can do because we have this new language, like sort of syntax, and that kind of is interesting as well. Like you can do styles inside your component, just put a style tag and just put CSS in it. But we could do more than that. You know, we can probably go further and try and do some cool things to help accessibility, for example. And that's something that's kind of close to my heart, as having spent so much time with it, working with accessibility at Meta, was like, how do we improve some of the things like around, you know, keyboard navigation, tab focus, and ensuring that, you know, not just like, oh, you're missing a label or alt text. Everyone does that and they have like, you know, different ways of doing it, but like going further, how can we improve it? And there's also the idea of integrating links, which is the native sort of framework by ByteDance, so that you can do sort of like native apps with Ripple, which is not just constrained to the web. So yeah, we have a bunch of really cool ideas, but unfortunately very limited amount of time to do it. It's like, that's a constraint, right? If we had an ability to code really fast, getting more things done, we would have got to do things already. But ultimately, that's the biggest constraint, limitation right now, is that being able to do it.
So you and the team that you have working on this, are any of you able to work on it full time, or is it very much you have day jobs and this is just on the side when you have availability and nights and weekends and things like that?
It's mainly just when we have availability. I don't put pressure on any of the people to do anything. I don't know if they all have day jobs either. I presume it, but like, yeah, it's something that we do in our free time. And there's never a rush to do something. There's never urgency, because end of the day, like, you already have lots of good options out there to use right now. And Ripple is very much like, we're taking our time to do it right. We'll get there and like people can play with it. And in fact, it's a very good thing to play with. I definitely don't recommend anyone building a production app in it, although I do know of 2 already out there. But like, it's very much now, it's kind of like we're finding our way, and we're very much looking for contributors and people to help maintain it and work on Ripple with us. Look at it like this is a Lego project where everyone's getting the bricks they want and putting them together and building models. And if you like doing that sort of thing with Ripple, it might be a good fit, and you can come join us and help. And maybe that'll benefit you and others. Like I mentioned before, I've benefited massively from open source in terms of the opportunities it's given me. Maybe it'll help others too. It's definitely something that if it takes off will be good on their resumes. And so for sure, if people are interested and want to help, come find us on the Discord channels and we can chat and you can build something with us.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to ask, is give it a plug, tell people how they can get involved, how they can reach you, how they can get involved with Ripple if they want to help make it better, push it forward.
Yeah, the more people we have helping us, obviously we don't want too many, like if we can't have 100 people working on the core one time, it would be too many chefs in the kitchen probably. But I think by having more people, you know, who are contributing, we'll get to our goals faster, we'll fix more bugs, and we'll have better test coverage and all the general things you have. I mean, it'd be great for Ripple to be full-time sponsored, but like that's difficult and a big ask for any sort of corporate or like tech company to get behind. But yeah, I mean, who knows what the future has for the project and for the maintainers on it.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it was building a TypeScript-first application like this? Because I know that that's something that it talks about a little bit on the website, and you talked about it briefly, but what is it like being able to just start from scratch and know that you want it to be type safe from end to end and really take advantage of all the native features that TypeScript kind of provides that everybody loves anyway?
For me, I wanted something that was JavaScript first. So it wasn't a HTML first. So you open a module and it's very much like a normal JavaScript module. You can export things, you can import things. There is no HTML, it's just like a JavaScript module. But at the same time, I wanted to bring along new syntax and new templating language. You can't do that in a .ts module that's kind of owned and controlled by TypeScript. You can do it in a JS module, but then you're being dishonest to people who have a lot of tooling already in the ecosystem that expects JS syntax to look like JS syntax. And so we decided that we'd, go that one bit further and make the new syntax. But then you're at the sort of crossroads of like, do we make it JS or do we make it TS, or do you make it optional JS and then TS? The truth is, people just really want TypeScript these days, and you can always disable TypeScript with say like no check if you want to, but then you have TypeScript there to work with you, give you the type safety. And obviously you have the things that TypeScript also helps you with as well. You have like, enums and other parts of the sort of extended spec they provide. But like by having that, it just enables you to move faster, I feel. And if people don't want to use TypeScript, they don't have to. They can just write JS and not put types in their code and not put TSC on and not do any type checking. We feel like it's valuable that it's there. To do that from scratch was difficult because, well, we didn't do it fully from scratch, but like we use a library called Vola, which is, I believe, what Vue uses and a few other frameworks use, which has sort of like a collection of like extensions and APIs that enable you to easily connect to VS Code and make a language server. And by doing that, we were able to like move faster. Although that also was a difficult experience because it's very little documentation. But thankfully, one of the maintainers was in contact with me. And so we were able to like figure out how certain things worked. And people ask me, why did I open source it whilst it was like completely not ready and really early? Like normally you open source when it's ready and you're excited to share with the world like this thing that you can actually go and use. But I felt like it was more fun to bring people along the journey of building it. And also for others out there who are like curious as how these things work. I've often been asked like, oh, how do I get involved in like working on React or Svelte? And it's hard because most of it's done already, or in a state where you consider it production worthy and tested. And so the opportunity to get involved and make changes is a lot harder. And I wouldn't say harder, but like is more involved. For us, it's a lot easier because there'll be like an API entirely missing. You can't spread props. So, people ask, what can I work? And I'm like, spread props. And I make that work. And they're like, okay, how do I do that? I'm like, play around. We can try it out together. We can pair on it, or you can go look how another framework does it, and we can kind of take inspiration there. But like the whole thing's kind of being very much guided through that way.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's really nice, though, because it doesn't seem like there's as much building in public as there used to be when it comes to open source. So having something that, like you say, is a little bit less polished and less finished is a way to bring in the new generation of developers who do want to get involved, but just haven't had the opportunity to really get an experience with that yet. So I think that's an awesome way to do it.
And it didn't actually set out to do it that way. It just organically happened that way. I think that's it's been a really important part of open source, like for me in my career. But also like it gets a lot of hate as well. There's a lot of people out there like, why bother? We already have React and it's got like everyone uses it and like nobody wants to work on something else, and there's negativity. I get sort of like the mental fatigue and drain of like another framework or like another thing to learn. The truth is you don't have to learn Ripple. You don't have to use it. You don't even have to look at it. But other people might want to. So, I mean, it's one of those. So it's been good. I try to filter that negativity out, although there's quite a lot of it at times, and especially from certain like sources, especially Twitter. There you go.
Twitter's terrible. Yeah. Try to stay off that as much as I can these days. So where do you kind of see the future of front-end frameworks going? I know you've talked a little bit about TypeScript-first, obviously seems to be a good shot. Doing diffs that are more fine-grained, reactivity, sort of like what you're doing or what Signals is doing. What else do you see as being like future ideas that frameworks will probably try and pick up as time moves forward?
What from Ripple? Take from Ripple? I think the templating we have is by far the biggest draw I've had, like lots of sort of comments on. Like Ryan Carnietto was messaging earlier today or yesterday about this new idea he has for Solid, which is kind of pseudo idea from Ripple syntax. And I think that's important. Like, I know Ryan quite well. He knows what he's talking about. And so if he thinks like this is a cool idea worth exploring, maybe it is, and there's always going to be like, pros and cons of doing this sort of thing. We have the advantage of like, we haven't got before. So you can't break an existing code base. You can't fork it. You can't say, oh, we support this and this and this and this, because then people just get confused and like, which one do I use? So we have the luxury of being this, and that's empowering. And I think that's probably going to help us longer term. But for the short term, our templating would be something I think others will lean into. Maybe they'll lean into sort of like our idea of just being a different extension and having that flexibility of doing things. But I know there's also the downside of then you fork the ecosystem. You have to update all tooling, and you have to make sure that ESLint and Prettier and everything works with it. But we've shown it's possible, so that it's not like impossible to do. It just takes time and a lot of patience and luck. when you type it into the prompt and you get the AI to do it, did it do it right? I think, yeah, for us, it's been, those are the things. I think our reactivity is something that isn't in itself that major. Like it's not much different from signals really, but it's just how we've done it might be something that others kind of like lean into in terms of implementation detail rather than in terms of like API. I think, there's a lot of what we have that looks like Svelte 5, and that's because we, like I said, like they're good things. We took them because they're great. And so like you can compare the two quite closely. But I think, longer term, we have bigger, bolder ideas. Like I mentioned with AI, I think that's really an interesting exploration zone that if we do it right, then it'll be, something that could really pay off. But that comes with a list of like, gotchas as well, like, security and privacy. If a company's using it, would they be willing to use it, or would they want their own model? And what model do you use, and who pays for it? And, it gets tricky. But like for now, we're just in a happy space.
Well, Dominic, it has been great talking to you today. Is there anything that we haven't touched on about Ripple that you want listeners to be aware of or know about?
No, I think that's it. I think it's been great talking to you. Great talking about Ripple. Like I mentioned, if anyone wants to get involved, come find us on Discord and ping somebody, or GitHub, of course. But like from there, it's like, just get involved, read more, know more, and and like hopefully this time 6 months we can catch up again and I'll give you an update on how things are going.
Yes, absolutely. We'll be sure to link to the Discord in the show notes, and for anybody who wants to get involved, point them in your direction. But thank you again for joining us on the podcast. It's been great having you here.
Thank you. It's been great here too.